Boy, this year has been a lot of things for me. I think it's been um, a roller coaster of emotions on a subconscious level. Um, but I think I'm going to look back on it, um, look back on my own experience of this year positively. Um, the pandemic interrupted my school life. Um, in March, I was, I think, a little bit before midway through a term in school, and I was in the middle of class when a student got a email uh, saying that classes were going to be canceled for the remainder of the term, or not canceled, but um, put online for the remainder of the term. And none of us knew how to take that. The professor of the class that I was in was even surprised. He didn't know that that was going to happen, um, and he didn't know what that meant. So none of us had answers. Um, we, I think we took a week off of school. Um, there was 1 week before classes would resume online, and that it started to sink in that this wasn't going to be something that lasted for a few days. Um, it was, this was going to have a big effect on our futures, I guess. So I was disappointed at first because I had plans of, I had a rough roadmap of the next few terms in school, hopefully returning to Japan after a trip I had taken with my family a few months earlier, hopefully finding an internship, opportunities to study over there. This was all sort of on the horizon for me. And I had to quickly sort of pivot my expectations. But I don't remember being too hung up on that. Sort of since around that time, and I think it happened around that time, I sort of quickly realized there's a lot more time in my schedule. There's a lot more time in my day-to-day that I can do with what I decide. And I didn't see that as a bad thing. The school I go to is incredibly rigorous, incredibly time-consuming. The coursework is enormous, and there's scarcely time to do anything extracurricular. And that's something that I really struggled with in the school because I have other interests, but I often would find I have no time for them. So my perspective quickly pivoted to this is not a time to do what I had planned. This is time to do other stuff that I didn't know I would have time for, but had the desire to do. So yeah, that was the beginning. Found time, sort of.
How do you feel, like socially Because I mean, you're at an age and you were in a position at school. So I
Right.
imagine that you had a network of friends that were important for you, and developing the social connections and all that has changed. Has Zoom been able to make up for it?
No, the social is completely changed. Um, I'm a sort of ambiverted person, and I need, only a little bit of social time to sort of get my fill. And, a lot of my life is in internal time. Um, so that hasn't really been an issue for me. I've seen it really sort of hurt some friends, um, friends who I hadn't maybe talked to as frequently. When I got in touch with them again, I could tell they were more anxious, um, sort of behaving differently than how I remembered they would usually act. Um, yeah, it's not going to be the same, but for me, I don't. It's not an issue for me. At least I'm not seeing it as an issue. The people who I'm really close with, um, I think, are handling it similarly to me. They're handling all of this time and negative space um, in their schedules, in their lives. Um, they're filling that time with things that they want to. Um, I have a friend who's getting really into bird watching and bird photography. Um, I picked up the flute uh, a month or two ago. That's something that I had wanted to do, and that's been incredibly fulfilling. Um, and being at home with my father, he's a practiced wind instrument musician. Um, so it's been wonderful to have his company and his sort of guidance in my beginnings of that. And this is something that I would absolutely not have time to do if I was in school right now as normal. Um, and now I'm preparing for another term online in May. I haven't been in school for the past number of months. I've taken that time off. I'm returning in May. And it's a bit uncomfortable because I have this feeling of sort of returning to part of my, I guess, pre-COVID life, but it's really not that. It's going to be transformed. Um, and it's still a bit of a tender wound because those months of online classes before I started my break were incredibly difficult, um, and strange. So it's not a comfortable shift.
So
Mm-hmm.
that tender wound, is it? Do you think it's related to the circumstances of the pandemic, or is that just where you were with the program?
It was a number of things. I was in a really uncomfortable living situation in Los Angeles. Um, Towards the end of my time in Los Angeles, the fires were picking up close to where I lived, and I had to keep myself physically safe um, while navigating the rest of the term in school and keeping my standards for my own work as high as I usually would. Um, so it was incredibly difficult. Um, yeah, so there's some personal trauma there.
So, probably, hopefully you would agree, or it's it's fair to say that you've found some silver linings in this time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Have any of your friends had trouble with that? Have anybody that you know has been struggling? Feels like their life's been put on hold.
Yes. No one that I'm really close to, though. I think all of us have some amount of that feeling of interruption and yes, our lives being put on hold, but my friends and the people that I'm close with, I think are all, we've grappled with the reality and we've pivoted.
So as you look to the future, and as you mentioned some things, you think are going to be different and not going to be the same again.
Mm-hmm.
Are you hopeful in that you see a better future in certain ways because of what we've gone through?
Yeah, early on, I was making daily trips with my roommate to a local park a few blocks from our apartment, maybe a couple months into quarantine. And those trips would be really the only times that we saw other people. And we would have these conversations about exactly that, about I think this time of sort of social fracture and deprivation has the potential to heighten people's appreciation for others. That's because we really it was a shock to us to go to the park and see families out walking and playing together. We had these sort of overwhelming feelings of gratitude that I hadn't experienced before in that setting, in that context of just appreciating just strangers being there. That was new, and that, I guess my hope is that other people have that same reaction or a similar reaction to that. Yeah.